Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari, Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana, Yamunatira Vanachari, Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Param Vijate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, this lovely evening we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita, 12th chapter, Devotional Service. We're in text 5. Klesho dikatarascheta Klesho dikatarattastesham Avyakta sakta chetasam Avyakta hi gatir dukam Dehavat bhiravapyate Klesho dikatarastesham Avyakta sakta chetasam Avyakta hi gatir dukam Dehavat bhiravapyate. question? No. Anyone else? Or does anyone need translation? Can everyone here follow in English? I can't say that. I can't ask that in English. It has to be asked in German. Okay. Klesha, trouble. Adhikattaraha, very much. Tesham, of them. Avyakta, to the unmanifested. Asakta, attached. Chetasam, of those whose minds. Avyakta, toward the unmanifested. He, certainly. Gatihi, progress. Dukkham, with trouble. Dehavadbihi, by the embodied. Avapyate, is achieved. Translation. For those whose minds are attached to the unmanifested, impersonal feature of the Supreme, advancement is very troublesome. To make progress in that discipline is always difficult for those who are embodied. And no surprise, Prabhupada wrote a bit of a lengthy purport. The group of transcendentalists who follow the path of the inconceivable, unmanifested, impersonal feature of the Supreme Lord are called Jnana Yogis, and persons who are in full Krishna consciousness engaged in devotional service to the Lord are called Bhakti Yogis. Now, here the difference between Jnana Yoga and Bhakti Yoga is definitely expressed. The process of Jnana Yoga, although ultimately bringing one to the same goal, is very troublesome, whereas the path of Bhakti Yoga, the process of being in direct service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is easier and is natural for the embodied soul. The individual soul is embodied since time immemorial. It is very difficult for him to simply theoretically understand that he is not the body. Therefore, the Bhakti Yogi accepts the deity of Krishna as worshipable because there is some bodily conception fixed in the mind, which can thus be applied. Of course, worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his form within the temple is not idol worship. There is evidence in the Vedic literature that worship may be saguna or nirguna, of the Supreme possessing or not possessing attributes. Worship of the deity in the temple is saguna worship, for the Lord is represented by material qualities. But the form of the Lord, though represented by material qualities such as stone, wood, or oil, paint, is not actually material, that is, the absolute nature of the Supreme Lord. A crude example may be given here. We may find some mailboxes on the street, and if we post our letters in those boxes, they will naturally go to their destination without difficulty. But any old box or an imitation which we may find somewhere, but which is not authorized by the post office, will not do the work. Similarly, God has an authorized representation in the deity form, which is called Archa Vigraha. This Archa Vigraha is an incarnation of the Supreme Lord. God will accept service through that form. The Lord is omnipotent, all-powerful. Therefore, by his incarnation as Archa Vigraha, he can accept the service of the devotee, just to make it convenient for the man in conditioned life. So, for a devotee, there is no difficulty in approaching the Supreme immediately and directly, but for those who are following the impersonal way to spiritual realization, the path is difficult. They have to understand the unmanifested representation of the Supreme through such Vedic literatures as the Upanishads, and they have to learn the language, understand the non-perceptual feelings, and realize all these processes. This is not very easy for a common man. A person in Krishna consciousness engaging in devotional service simply by the guidance of the bona fide spiritual master, simply by offering regulative obeisances unto the deity, simply by hearing the glories of the Lord, and simply by eating the remnants of foodstuffs offered to the Lord, realizes the Supreme Personality of Godhead very easily. There's no doubt that the impersonalists are unnecessarily taking a troublesome path with the risk of not realizing the absolute truth at the ultimate end. But the personalist, without any risk, trouble, or difficulty, approaches the Supreme Personality directly. A similar passage appears in Srimad Bhagavatam. It is stated there that if one ultimately has to surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, this surrendering process is called Bhakti, but instead takes the trouble to understand what is Brahman and what is not Brahman and spends its whole life in that way, the result is simply troublesome. Therefore, it is advised here that one should not take up this troublesome path of self-realization because there is uncertainty in the ultimate result. A living entity is eternally an individual soul, and if he wants to merge into the spiritual whole, he may accomplish the realization of the eternal and knowledgeable aspects of his original nature, but the blissful portions not realized. By the grace of some devotee, such a transcendentalist, highly learned in the process of jnana yoga, may come to the point of bhakti yoga or devotional service. At that time, long practice in impersonalism also becomes a source of trouble, because he cannot give up the idea. Therefore, an embodied soul is always in difficulty with the unmanifest, both at the time of practice and at the time of realization. Every living soul is partially independent, and one should know for certain that this unmanifested realization is against the nature of a spiritual blissful self. One should not take up this process. For every individual living entity, the process of Krishna consciousness, which entails full engagement in devotional service, is the best way. If one wants to ignore this devotional service, there is the danger of turning to atheism. Thus, the process of centering attention on the unmanifested, the inconceivable, which is beyond the approach of the senses, as already expressed in this verse, should never be encouraged at any time, especially in this age. It is not advised by Lord Krishna. Om Ajnanatimmirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukam Karati Vachalam Pangum Langate Girim Yat Kripatamaham Bande Shri Gurum Dinataranam Vancha Kalpatrubhyascha Kripa Sindubhyeva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. I happen to be the one who did the overview of the 12th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, and in that overview, this verse played an important role, and it does play an important role in this chapter. As a matter of fact, this is one of the emphatic statements in this chapter. This 12th chapter, Prabhupada entitled Devotional Service or Bhakti Yoga. And for a reason, as in this chapter, Arjuna raises a question which is of great interest. Which, by the way, is something that Arjuna did few times throughout Bhagavad Gita, when he asked of Krishna, could you please tell me now, in no unclear manner, which is which? And what do you mean by this? Is it this or is it that? Just put it plainly for me. That's how Arjuna asked that question. And so in this chapter, Arjuna asked a question in a similar fashion. And throughout this chapter, Krishna discusses this answer. And I remember when I was a young brahmachari, like really passionate. And I was sort of dissatisfied with Krishna, I have to tell you. I was waiting for Krishna to just like smash these Mayavadis, smash these meditators, like put them in their place and kick them out of the house altogether. But nothing like it. It's actually very balanced, presentation that we're witnessing here by Krishna. I remember when Bhakti Swami was visiting Croatia for the first time that I was there, and someone said that he really disliked Mayavadis, and we were all like, now we're going to compile questions that are going to incite fury in him, and so that he'll just like smash the Mayavadis. We just wanted to see some smashing. I guess it's the boys' business to blow stuff up. Maybe girls don't have those kind of urges, but so let's blow up the Mayavadis to pieces. And that's what we did. We compiled a bunch of questions, and then when Maharaj came, we just couldn't excite this fury in him. He was so tranquil and equipoised. That really impressed me. There's a saying that, how does that go? Learning, is it learning? Learning is hard, so I judge. What is hard? Not learning. In the States, there's a saying that, something along those lines, that it's not learning, it's, what is it? Studying. Understanding. Oh, everything along those lines. But, you're talking to someone on the internet? Thinking is hard. Thinking is hard, that's right. I thought you were talking to someone on the internet as you. I thought, wow, that's pretty loud. Thinking is hard, so I judge. Thinking is hard, so I judge. And that's very common amongst people. In other words, what does it mean? Thinking is hard, so I judge. It means that the person is not thinking, but it's just rushing to conclusions. And this is very common. And like mad crowds. What do they call that? Lynching crowds. Do you know what lynching crowd is? From the Wild West days of America. People would have a wild guess that someone might have stolen a horse or a cow, and let's just hang him. It's a lynching mob. There's no point arguing with this crowd. They're a bunch of uneducated, bloodthirsty people. And what it is, crowd that's crowded, bloodthirsty crowd. That's a crowd made up of individuals who found thinking hard, so they just judge. So that's how it goes. And people love this. People love this. You'd be surprised how many people in the name of transcendence love doing this. It's like jumping to conclusions. And they expect you to jump to same conclusions. So what Krishna is doing here is giving a very clear but also very balanced picture as to what is the position of the process of bhakti in terms of who's better connected? That was Arjuna's question. And the process of bhakti and the process of jnana. Or actually, what's the term? Those who pursue avyakta. Avyakta means that which is not manifested, unseen, impersonal, like that. And throughout this chapter, and also in other places like Bhagavatam, we get a very balanced picture, and not balanced in the sense like, okay, you have one extreme, you have the other extreme, and you find the middle. Like I remember once I was asked by, it was a gathering of sannyasis and GBCs and temple presidents in North America, and I was given the task to make a presentation on something, some topic. And then the GBC representative asked me, and please make a balanced presentation. So I thought that was a very funny thing. Like, what do you mean balanced? Like, what are you balancing? Two extremes, but how can you tell what is the extreme? What if one extreme is more extreme than the other? And if you're finding the middle, you won't be in the middle. You will again be on the side of something. So not balanced in that sense, like Krishna is trying to please everyone, but balanced in the sense that it's nuanced. How do you say that in German? Nuanced. Oh, same. Okay. Yeah, nuanced means that it's recognizing all the details, all the fine things. That means nuanced. And reality it's complex. And so Krishna does say that there is that kind of a perfection. Interesting enough, it's called perfection. Impersonalism as perfection. As a matter of fact, there are statements even throughout the Bhagavatam that describe impersonal realization as perfection. And here too, Krishna calls it perfection. But it's an imperfect perfection. Go figure. How does that work? It's an imperfect perfection. So it is perfection in the sense that that is a goal, that it's outside of this world. In other words, it is a transcendental goal, and it places one in a transcendental position, and that's an admirable goal. That is an admirable goal, and these people are no joke. Who are endeavoring for this kind of perfection. As a matter of fact, these people are very difficult to find. They're super rare. But throughout this chapter, Krishna says very clearly that is a perfection, but Bhakti Yogi is connected way better. And when Krishna speaks of connection, it doesn't speak of a temporary connection, but he speaks of eternal connection. Sahaja connection. Sahaja means natural connection. In other words, what is the nature of the ultimate reality? According to the nature of the ultimate reality, we're best connected as individuals. Where Krishna is an individual and we are an individual. And yeah, you can be connected also through the impersonal path, by the impersonal path and the concepts, impersonal concepts. You could be connected to the avyakta. But that connection, even though it's considered some form of perfection, it is an imperfect perfection. To the point that Bhagavatam, in one of the stronger statements, says that Yushmad Angraha, that those who, how does that verse go? Aruhya krichrena parampadam tata patanti adaha anadrida Yushmad Angraha. How does that begin? It'll come to me afterwards, as typically happens. That one may achieve perfection, but if one has neglected to surrender unto the lotus feet of Krishna, one will fall down. In other words, such is the nature, eternal nature of every living entity, that primarily living entity is a person. And then in this verse, Krishna says, Krich, what is it? Klesha. And in the verse from the Bhagavad, Krich Reina means with pain. Krich means pain, and Klesha means misery. In this verse we have the term Klesha. Klesha Adhikar. Like the qualification for this path is that accepting a lot of pain. I don't know if any one of you ever suffered emotionally, but it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. And impersonal path is sort of wrestling against your own very nature. That tells you ought to feel, you ought to have emotions. I remember once, I don't remember where I was traveling because it was flying out an awful lot. And it was some airport somewhere. And I was trying to find a seat at a busy airport to sit somewhere and rest. I was really tired. And then there was one spot. But on each side of that spot was one woman, one on the other side and one on the other. And they were so scantily dressed. You know what it means, scantily? Like, they were mostly undressed. You know. And the cloth, their clothes and the makeup, I mean, they were like hookers. And I was like, I'm not gonna sit there. I'm not that advanced. And so I walked one more round around, and then next time I chanced upon that place, I saw a spot just across, opened up, and I sat there. Then I saw a Buddhist monk. He came and he sat between these two women. It was a young fellow. He just wanted to show off. He sat in between these, provocatively appearing women, And he sat there, cross-legged, and he was meditating. I thought that's ridiculous, man. He just wanted to show off that he's above it. And then that same day, I met another Buddhist monk who was so good at showing no emotions. And I remember they were giving him a hard time with his passport or something, whatever it was. And he was really good at showing no emotions, like whatsoever, like that. And I thought about it, At first it looked very impressive, like he seemed so above whatever was going on there. But I don't know if you ever tried to live emotionless. It's impossible. Like you always have attitude towards something. Like for example, even to choose to have no emotions is almost based on an emotion. And then when you manage to, like this monk, as he managed to go through that unpleasant experience, did he feel good? Did he feel successful? If he didn't feel good or didn't feel successful, like there's always some emotion. And as a matter of fact, in Bhakti we're told that the perfectional stage is an emotional stage. It's a stage filled with divine emotion. And that is our eternal nature. And to try to go against it it's a very painful process. Very painful process. Yeah, I better skip that. Wisdom. What is wisdom? It could be described in different ways, but one way in which we could describe wisdom is the ability to connect the result with its cause. You have a result, you have a phenomenon, and there is a cause. And wisdom is ability. Perhaps I'm trying to, doesn't have to be defined like this, but I'm defining it right now. The wisdom is the ability to connect the outcome with the cause. And very often this proves to be quite difficult. Very difficult. I knew a devotee used to get boils in India. You know what boils are? They're like acne, but like 20 times bigger, with a lot of pus under the skin, and it's painful. And it's a result of too much pitta, fire in the body. And he was trying to find the cause of it. Okay, there's the result, there's the boil. But what caused it? Where did it come from? And then he met a person of knowledge, a doctor. And the doctor asked him, do you do this, do you that? And they went through a huge list of questions. And then the doctor told him, you should quit eating eggplant. He quit eating eggplant, and there was no more boils. I mean, go figure. What does eggplant have to do with boils? Well, it has inside pitta in the body. So similarly, people one day, and those are really very, very few, people who try to solve the problem of living or dying, because they come together. The problem of living and dying. The existential problem. People who try to solve this, they ask themselves, I myself asked this question for years. Like, what is the nature of liberation? This life that I'm experiencing right now it's definitely not it. I can tell. Just there's way too many things wrong and painful. This is not it. But what's the nature of liberation? And then, of course, Prabhupada comments that in the Bhagavad Gita, Vitaraga Bhaya Krodha Manmaya Mamupashitaha bahavo jnana tapasa puta mad bhavam agataha. Thank you. That many have come to me, many have come to perfection by tackling few issues, such as vita means to get rid of problems of raga, attachment, bhaya, fear or frustration, vitaraga, bhaya, krodha means anger or frustration, excuse me. And so Prabhupada comments there that people notice that personal existence is very, very troublesome. Very troublesome. Like they say, you cannot live with people, neither can you live without them. Like a horrible position. Oh, you cannot live without people. Oh, you cannot live with people, neither can you live without them. It's like a horrible position. Because people are causing pain. Pain comes from relationships. But way worse pain is having no relationships. That's like an ultimate punishment, where you're forced into solitary confinement. You're not allowed to associate with anyone. You go crazy. Then even the worst of people that you used to know seem like a desirable company. So people have a tendency to conclude, because they experience pain in relationships, that therefore ultimate nature of reality must be impersonal. I was really big on it as a teenage boy. It made so much sense to me. But more I tried to live the life of an impersonalist, more I could see how unreal it was. And there is there's a logical progression in acquiring knowledge. The process of acquiring knowledge is a process of going into the unknown. You're trying to make the unknown known. And when you do that, you can begin from the position of knowing or not knowing. So when you're going towards something that you don't know, you can start from that which you know or from that which you don't know. And so obviously, way superior start is to start from that which you do know. Like for example, if you come to a crime scene, you don't start speculating what happened from that which you don't know. You start from that which you do know. Like, okay, there was a person. That person was here at that time. There's a watch. So like that, what we do know, let's say we don't know what the, time's up. Let's say we don't know what the nature of ultimate reality is. Let's say we don't know. And when we're trying to find out, then we should begin from that which we do know. And what we do know is that we are persons. And just to negate that it doesn't make sense. So, what should I do? Stop? Well, oh, is it? Okay, I won't be a Pashandi. Okay. And so finally, when I had the opportunity to read books translated, commented upon, and written by Srila Prabhupada, it made so much sense to me. A lot of sense. I think I was 13 when I got the copy of Bhagavad Gita. No, 14. It made a lot of sense to me. I was reading it for years, reread it God knows how many times. Started to make a lot of sense. And that's what our literature says. Harir hi nirguna saksha. This is in the Bhagavad, a very interesting verse. It says, Hari, the Supreme, is nirguna sakshat. Nirguna means impersonal. No guna, no characteristics. The Supreme is impersonal. Nirguna sakshat, directly. Harir hi nirguna sakshat. But then the next line says Purusha Prakriti. So, yeah, he is nirguna, but he is a Purusha. He's a person. It's like, what in the world? But he's Purusha. Purusha. But what kind of a Purusha? What kind of a person? Prakriti Paraha. Paraha means transcendental to Prakriti, to matter. And my God, how much sense that made. Okay, I'm a person, I know that now. And being a person is painful. So the solution is not to cut the person out. The solution is in the transcendental person. So that person is nirguna and it is prakriti sakshat. And then the verse says, Sasarvadrik upadrashta. And he's so transcendental. He's just witnessing all the madness and nonsense going on down here. Like he's not involved. He's transcendental to it. Tam bhajan nirguno bhavet. And if you worship that person, you become nirguna like him. In other words, you become equally transcendental. Wow! Makes a lot of sense. Was I giving that example here? I can't remember. I was giving an example of a friend of mine who was mad at God. I have? Yeah, he was really upset with Krishna. Like, Krishna, why did you do this to me? And I said that he wouldn't abandon Krishna if he could have. But he could not have. And that is the nature of personal realization. It's way too deep. That even when he's in his illusion state, being mad with Krishna, he couldn't give up on Krishna. And to find a solution to his problem, what did he do? He chanted Krishna's name 64 rounds a day. And then the answer came. To me, very funny story. Tam bhajan nirguna bhavet. And so as you worship him, you also become like him. And Srila Prabhupada in the purport here today says that if you take to the impersonal path that leads to impersonal perfection, it says, okay, first it's troublesome. Prabhupada speaks about, in terms of classical path of jnana, where you study Sanskritam. By the way, very complicated language. I think like takes you 10 years just to study the grammar. Just to grasp the basics of grammar, like get it relatively solid. Very complicated language, And then once you have learned the language, then you have to study all these Upanishads, because Upanishads are section of the Vedic literature that deals with the path of jnana. Very difficult. Prabhupada says that's very difficult. And then he says then on top of it, there's the problem that you may become an atheist. Why would you become an atheist if you're endeavoring for transcendence? Because if you endeavor for transcendence, and the transcendence is so bitter, you may come to reject it. And again, it will be an emotional position. And the interesting thing about emotions is that when emotions take a position, you cannot change that easy. It's interesting how some people, just because of their emotional state, they take to the life of renunciation. And you try to tell them, look man, there's money, there's beauty this, there's beauty that, there is comfort. No interest. As a matter of fact, it makes me puke. As Prabhupada quoted Yamunacharya, my lips curl and I spit at the idea of it. And some other people, when the emotions form they seek exactly the opposite. And then sometimes even when they rationally understand that is not the good thing, they still can't fight it because the emotions have gone down that path. That is the nature of emotion. And it's funny how modern people they just play with these emotions like these activities bear no important consequences. I know devotees who have given in to drinking. Drinking means alcohol. Because they were left by a girlfriend or a boyfriend. Like a mad state. I can remember at least 5 or 6 devotees in good standing. Who had similar experiences like this. And the modern world is just like open field. Yeah, whatever your emotion is, go follow it. It's no good. Very dangerous, man. Because that's the nature of emotion. When emotion runs down the hill, you cannot stop that. I mean, you can, but not that easy. Or be very careful where you let your emotions go. That's why there's the rational side of ourselves that's supposed to guide the emotion towards the good place. That's Bhakti. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur said that the purpose of the intellect is not to stifle the feeling, the emotion, the heart, but to let it grow unlimitedly in Krishna consciousness. That the purpose of the intellect or intelligence is not to stifle the emotion, the heart, the feelings, but to guide them so they can develop unlimitedly in Krishna consciousness. Yes, yeah. Yeah, I'll say one more interesting thing from this purport that Prabhupada wrote. Prabhupada speaks about deity. Like, I don't know if anyone of you has ever tried to develop a relationship with a deity, and that's very possible. And it's actually quite easy. Very easy. And it's very natural too. If you just give it a shot, you'll see how it pulls you in. If you have a hard time having a relationship with an impersonal concept of God, here is the deity, Prabhupada says. It says, if you're accustomed to seeing, touching, feeling, etc., here's the deity. And then Prabhupada says an interesting thing, but it cannot be just any deity. It cannot be just any form. It has to be an authorized form. And then it gives the example of mailboxes. And if we look at the principle of what Prabhupada is saying here, is like we have a tendency when we're in pain to take any medicine. Man, as long as it's going to fix my pain. But Prabhupada says, no. It has to be authorized. It has to be the right thing. And this is also very important, because when people are in great need, they're so easy to cheat themselves and be cheated by others. And we can see in the world of religion, there's a lot of cheaters. A lot of cheaters. This devotee that's traveling with me, driving me around, he told me a few stories like this. Before coming to Krishna consciousness, he went to this group, that group, he was investigating, looking around. But anyways, I want to finish this. Maybe some other time I'll how people are just cheated. And as Prabhupada says, you want to be cheated, that's why you're cheated. So when you're in a great need, don't rush to be cheated. Go to the authorized, seek the right thing. Why to seek the right thing? If even the fake thing can fix the problem. That is the thing, that the fake thing will not fix the problem. It will only apparently fix the problem. It's a patchwork. Do you know what a patchwork is? Yeah. Patch is like if your pants rip and you just sew a patch over it, Then after a while you have patches everywhere on your pants, and then, they just fall apart. That's called patchwork. You just stick something over the hole, but the hole's still there. It's just being patched up. So that's the problem with an unauthorized, with an inauthentic thing, that it only seems to give a solution, but that's not a lasting solution. Lasting solution comes only from the real thing. And that's why Prabhupada says, you may put your letter in any old mailbox, but if the mailbox, that particular old, neglected mailbox, is not authorized by the post office, your mail will go nowhere. You'll just have a sensation of feeling good that you have sent a letter, but the letter will go nowhere. Like that. Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govinda. You know this. Bhaja Govinda Mudha Mate. O fools, worship Govinda, worship Govinda. Because at the time of death, your Dukrin Karane, your jugglery with the syllables of Sanskrit language will not help you. It's like a conclusion, Bhaja Govinda. Which is sort of what Srila Prabhupada mentioned here, because in the process of jnana, this is a very important element to master the language and then really, really precisely understand what the Vedas are saying. Especially these portions that deal with that deal with jnana. But then at the end, the devotee says, "Oh, fool, just worship Govinda, worship Govinda." In other words, that will help you. This jugglery, word jugglery, and scrutinizingly looking at Sanskrit grammar will not help you. I can really relate to it. As I was trying to practice this path of jnana as a teenage boy, I just noticed that years are going by and I'm not really concluding anything. It's like, this is not good. I need a solution very quickly. So I can relate to that. All right. Muktir hitva anyata rupam, Bhagavatam also says that mukti or liberation is hitva, abandoning anyata rupam, all other forms. But svarupena vyavastiti, but holding on to your real form. That is that is our ultimate nature. That's why even if we achieve impersonal perfection, that is sub-perfection. And the Bhagavatam says that even if you achieve that, it's just a matter of time when you will not be comfortable in your liberated state. Okay. Any questions or comments? 1, 2, 3 in this order. Did you have a hand? No. So.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Maharaj, for the nice lecture. I had actually 2 questions, when it's made possible. The first one was also I taught before the lecture when we was reading the verse. The second was coming up after. And I start with the second one, maybe. Is also related directly to the verse. I was meditating because Krishna is explaining, okay, like somehow like an impersonalist also can reach me, but it's a difficult way. But somehow I was meditating, yes, but what it means, is it really possible to reach it with the impersonal way? But because somehow you mentioned also one verse, when you told, actually you will come to fall without bhakti. That means, is it really possible to really only with impersonal way to reach him? Because somehow it sounds it's actually not
by impersonal means, first you don't come to Krishna. Yeah. And when Krishna says you come to me, doesn't mean that that such a person comes to Krishna, a person. No, that person comes to the impersonal feature of the Supreme.
Yeah. I mean, actually this means that actually it is not possible, but it's step by step he will, like by a tennis game, he will go here and by a tennis game.
Oh, tennis.
He will go here and there, up and down, and then after one time he will come to bhakti, something like this. But he has to.
Oh, you mean okay? I see.
Actually, with this path, he actually cannot really reach Krishna. It's actually not possible.
To reach like Krishna, Brahma. You have to come to bhakti.
Yes, that's actually
to come to Krishna as a person, and that's why it's stated time and time again that the nature of ultimate reality is personal. And I mean, why to go all impersonal? And then from there go to the personal? It's like, man, why?
But on the other hand, it's a bit, not understandable why Krishna then, may he don't say it in this way, maybe should need detailed in the words what Krishna is explaining, but why Krishna is telling, even he will reach me, but maybe it's actually an open end, he will reach me maybe somehow or on some path, but actually not on the end.
I understood it, and I'm not saying that I got it right, but it's just, I understood it that it means that will reach impersonal aspect of Krishna by impersonal path.
Thank you. And the second question, maybe it's a
Yeah.
short one, but that was also coming on my mind.
Prabhupada says that also in the introduction to Bhagavad Gita, very emphatically. You have to be devotee to come to Krishna.
Yeah.
Not jnani, not yogi,
Yeah.
not even meditators on Paramatma can come to Krishna.
Yeah.
Very like,
I see.
very clearly
Clear point.
stated.
Yeah, thank you. The second thing was on the beginning when you was reading the verse, that actually in the last sentence, to make progress in that discipline is always difficult for those who are embodied. That was, I mean, okay, we are in a body, it's somewhere in a mature body, also animals, also trees, also, I mean, maybe a ghost, I don't know, but it says fine physical. But what it really means embodied, is it maybe not when we are not embodied, or why was the point from embodiment? It was a little bit question in my mind, what we can understand.
The way I got it is that throughout the purport, Prabhupada was referring to us in the body.
Yeah.
So, like for example, Prabhupada says we're accustomed to seeing, touching, tasting, like that. And that's why the deity. Like Krishna, he says, okay, you don't see me? Here, see me as a deity. So now it's easier for you to relate to me. But if you want to practice the impersonal path, you're in the body, and you're accustomed to very personal, direct experience, such as touch. Like, it's going to be very difficult. And don't underestimate that. It's super difficult. I had one bhakta who eventually became an initiated devotee, but that was so long ago, it's like maybe 30 years. I can't even remember his name anymore. But he became a brahmachari. And I was really huge on collecting young men and making them brahmacharis. That was my passion. And so I got him. Got him too. And it was very easy. He put up no fight. He just went with me to ashram and stayed in the ashram, and that was it, you know. And then he showed me a prospect from a Buddhist monastery that he went to. Like, he wanted to be a monk. That's why it was so easy for him, you know, to make the decision. He wanted to be a monk, and he went to a Buddhist monastery. And then when I read the prospect, for God's sake, like they also get up quite early, and then they drink some tea, tasteless tea. And then they meditate, you know. And then they do something, and then they again drink same tasteless tea, you know. And then they work. And then they, again, the tasteless tea. I don't know what's up with that tea 10 times a day. And then they work. And then they have a meal, and it says small meal. They have a small meal, and then a little bit of rest, and then again some work, and then some tea, and then some meditation, then go to bed. And I was thinking, well, actually he told me when he came to us, like we fed him, you know. We loaded him with prasad. He came to Kirtan, and then all the devotees were jumping and screaming in ecstasy, you know. It was a happiness overload, you know, for him. Coming from a Buddhist monastery. And I don't mean to offend any Buddhists, but, you know, it was such a stark contrast, you know. Like, he took to it as fish to water. He took to it as fish to water. Yeah. After all that tea and we were just like happiness overload. And we had another experience. I had one more brahmachari, very similar experience. He wanted to become also monk at some impersonalist Buddhist tradition in San Diego. And he went to their place and it was locked. Rang the bell, no one was there, And then he went to another location, and then the third location, and they're all closed. And then he had nowhere to spend the night, And then he found a flyer that we had at the Krishna Lounge. We had this room where we would do kirtan, Thursdays night, and talk and prasadam, and people would come together and laugh and hang out. And he came there. He has a whole night to kill. So, how did you translate that? Had a whole night to kill.
Zum Totschlagen.
Yeah. Not literally kill. He had a whole night to kill. So, all right, these people are there till 11, and we used to go till sometimes 1 in the morning. And he came there, and he read meditation, the mantra meditation. There was kirtan, like people roaring in ecstasy. So like happiness overload, And he just stayed. He never went anywhere else. He just stayed. Became a devotee there, San Diego. So that's how I understood, but understood Prabhupada, because it's a continuation of what Prabhupada said earlier in the purport.
Thank you, Maharaj.
And it's stated in the verse itself. You see, where's the verse? 5th. What is this chapter? Okay, that's the right chapter. Deha vadbir, for one who is in Deha, in the body. Yeah. Oh yeah, it's there.
Thank you. To make more sense, more connection, that yes, we have the body, we have to deal with it.
When you have a body, it's a very personal experience. I mean, you got ears, you got nose, you smell, you touch, you hear. And then there's the subtle body that feels, got emotions.
Thank you.
Who was second?
Marge, so it seems like in personalist there's like the Mayavadi, and then there's the Brahmavadi, like the 4 Kumaras that are not offensive and then quite easily become devotees. Because sometimes I hear often the statement that this realization of Brahman means nothingness, just this Sat aspect, eternal aspect. But then at the same time, Krishna mentions, I think 1854, 55, Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma, this verse that when one realizes Brahman, one becomes joyful. So then it seems like that not the Mayavadi impersonal realization, but the Brahmavadi, that Brahman has more than just this realization, I'm eternal. So that's my question. Where does this joyful aspect come from that Krishna talks about in this verse?
Well, throughout Bhakti literature, it is recognized that there is satisfaction in impersonal realization, Brahmavad or Mayavad. There is satisfaction in it. But in comparison to Bhakti, that's just like, it's a joke. It's so useless. You can't even call it satisfaction. Yeah.
So it's the comparison from Bhakti to that, it's like insignificant.
Yeah. And it's not a prominent feature, pleasure and satisfaction is not a prominent feature of impersonal realization. I mean, it is there, but it's not a prominent feature.
Mm-hmm.
In Bhakti, it is.
Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Hare Krishna, thank you very much, Maharaj. And as far as I understood, please correct me, you
Here
said...
comes a celery-powered question.
Oh.
Sorry.
Thank you. No. You mentioned that if
This came out of affection.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I'm listening.
That if we are in need, then we have the tendency to hurry or to rush into maybe false emotions or something like that. And it reminded me of the 15th chapter in the end, where Prabhupada states that the first thing that transcendentalist has to give up is weakness of heart. And in comparison to your
Did you say 14? That's in the 15th chapter.
15th.
Yeah,
15th. And when you were mentioning in the lecture, the question came how to become strong, not to make this rushing or hurrying into some false decision. Can you refer a little bit, how can we become strong in this regard? How can we strengthen this?
You know what, I have a tendency to dig up all kinds of crazy things. Once I watched a psychological profile of a murderer, and I watched the whole process. And the interesting thing in pertaining to what you're just asking was how he got caught. Like he committed a crime that left no evidence connecting him to the crime. So everyone just had a hunch that it must have been him, but there was no proof. And so he was just being relentlessly questioned, you know, for hours and hours and hours and hours. And then the temporary pain of being under pressure and questioned so much. And the police applied all kinds of emotional pressure on him. You know, like they're gonna hook him to polygraph, you know, but then they tap him on the back. But you need not worry. So the woman says, you can never lie to this thing. This thing always detects the lie. But you need not worry because we know you didn't do it. That puts a huge pressure on him, you know, like he's like a pressure cooker, cannot express it, but all of the fear is in him, you know. Oh my God, I'm gonna get caught. And he couldn't tolerate the pressure anymore, and he just blurted out, I did it. And what happened there was, the psychology behind it is that you put pressure on a person, and when the pressure becomes strong enough, the person is ready to give up the rest, the comfort for the rest of their life, for the comfort of the few minutes now. That's why, and Srila Prabhupada repeated this many times in his lectures, that prerequisite for acquisition of knowledge is tapasya, austerity. And so every system of knowledge that does not have tapasya as an integral part of it, it's not a good one. And tapasya is this process where you learn to give up the immediate pleasure for the lasting pleasure. If you cannot do that, you will always give in to the immediate pleasure. Like, for example, if you're under pressure, you're feeling a huge need that needs to be satisfied. And if you're not a tapasvi, you're not self-controlled, you cannot hold the horses back. You'll sell your soul. Just, man, give me some patchwork type of religion, and I'll be okay. So as it works there, it works in many other situations that the person finds himself throughout life, especially in the process of searching.
Thank you.
You are welcome. Thank you too for the atomic drink. Yesterday, I took only one cup. I gave the other one because it's usually mixed. Celery is very strong. Yeah. It's usually mixed with something. Yeah. And 2 cups, that's a lot for. So I shared the goods. Okay, are we done? Yes. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada ki Jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki